Hey guys, Ryan here at Signature Edits, and I'm excited to take you through our clean and classic preset pack today, show you what's inside, the inspiration behind it, kind of what you can expect when using it across a ton of different images. We've got lots of different demos from different lighting conditions and different camera types, and then we'll kind of talk about what goes wrong with presets, how you can get the very best out of them, and what to do when things don't go the way you expect. So, for starters, the name kind of explains it all. Clean and Classic is designed to give your images a beautiful, natural pop without really changing and warping the colors. The reason is we want to keep things looking timeless. So without further ado, I'll just walk through what we've got inside here. Here's our base preset, which is really designed to just brighten the skin tones a little bit, add some pop to the image, and of course you can dial that back. And one of the cool things about this pack is we've actually included and created camera profiles specifically for using Clean and Classic. So what is a camera profile? Well, it instructs Lightroom how to interpret the colors. But essentially what this gives you is an effect slider, kind of like an Instagram filter. You can dial in the opacity. Well, you can do that with these profiles as well and dial in the amount of pop you want in your image. So that's really cool. And then we've got different variations of this first preset. So we've got a skin darken for if the skin is just too bright in your image. We've got one for high dynamic range. If you find that there's just too much contrast going on, well, that preset will take care of that for you. We've got one for desaturating blues, desaturating greens, fixing green skin. So here's the original preset, and then you can see that this one is just going to add some magenta to the skin and kind of counteract any white balance issues you might have. And this is really helpful if you're shooting a wedding, for instance, and you're outside somewhere on the lawn and you have a lot of green grass, green trees, green shrubbery around you. It's going to reflect onto the skin of your subject, and so that will just counteract that. We can warm up the greens if we like. Now we've got a more earthy vibes. If you want to have more organic kind of look to your images, well, this one is definitely going to be for you. Then we've got a bunch of different black and whites. So we've got two essential styles. One is a very clean, very classic style, and the other is adding some warmth to your image as well. So you can kind of choose between those. And then we've got two intensities. So we have a black and white plus, which is going to just add some more contrast to your image, and black and white warm, and black and white warm plus, of course, is just going to kind of take that effect a little bit further. And finally, in this bottom section, we have a variety of indoors and nighttime presets. And that's because indoors and nighttime scenes tend to have the greatest contrast in lighting. You never really know what to expect when you're shooting indoors, how harsh the light is going to be, what level the light's going to be at, and what color those lights are going to be. So these presets are basically meant to give you a lot of different options so that depending on the situation, you have something that fits that. Lastly, we've got a sunset preset here, which really isn't doing much to the colors at all, because when it's sunset time, generally, we're just adding a little bit of a skin bump and making the skin slightly more magenta, but we want to keep those colors really saturated, really natural, because you don't want to blow out the sky or make it look desaturated. We want to keep those colors in the sky. So we'll show you that more in context later. Lastly, we've got a couple quick edits. So these aren't presets in themselves, they'll just add noise reduction to your image. So if I was finding my image had a lot of noise in it, I could use the noise reduction preset. That's not going to change the look of the image, it's just going to edit the noise reduction down here. Add some of that in there, or noise reduction plus is just going to take that even further if you're in a really high noise situation, really dark at night, that kind of a thing. Okay, so now that we've gone through the preset pack, explained what's inside and kind of how it works, let's take a look and go through our demo images. So I will jump back to the beginning here, and you can see that really this preset pack is designed to enhance the colors that are already in the image and just add some pop. And you can dial that in. So if this is way too much contrast for you, that's fine. Just dial back our profile slider like that, and you're set. All right, let's keep going. So I've got this photo here. We're going to apply our basic preset. Just see how things look. Now, right off the bat, you can see that things are maybe a little bit too intense. If we zoom in 1-to-1 here on her eye, you can see that before and after, we've got a lot of red being introduced into her hair, which is okay because that was already there. It's just kind of taking out the color and exaggerating what already exists. But it's just going a little bit too far, even in the corner of her eye, adding some weird reddy oranginess. Why is that? Well, it's probably because our dehaze is just too high for this specific photo. So this is the one thing with these presets, you're going to have to dial in the amount of dehaze occasionally when it's too much for your specific situation. So just depending on the photo, you kind of got to do that and add a little bit of contrast just to even things out here. And here's our before and our after, some nice pop going on. If you want to, we can change the hue of our blues to be a little bit less green since this was taken around sunset, so maybe we want things to be a little more pink. And if you wanted to recover that sky, the easiest way you could do that is to zoom out Grab an adjustment brush. We're just going to set it to auto mask and press O so we see our mask. Then click on the sky a couple of times here. There we go. And you can see that auto mask is just finding different parts of the image that line up with the same amount of brightness and color. Great. We've got a little bit of masking going on her hair, on her face here that I'm going to remove. So I'm just going to erase that. And from there we can press O again to hide the mask, take our highlights down, maybe add a little bit of contrast in there, maybe a little bit of magenta too, because it's around sunset and so we've got some red in the sky. Perfect, something like that. So here's before and after. Let's keep going. So in this photo right here, I think we've already got a preset on there. We'll reset it. We can just apply our main preset, or maybe we go with a blue desaturation preset. Sometimes the blues look a little bit too much in an image like this, and you can see that we're not really adjusting the colors extraordinarily. We're just adding some good lens correction, some sharpening, making the image pop a little bit. We could maybe, because there's no people in this image, no skin tones to preserve, we could take our contrast up a little bit, maybe add in a tiny bit of saturation if we wanted to. Some other presets that often work for these kind of shots are the Night Earthy and Night Earthy Minus, which is just a stripped back version of that Night Earthy. You can see that looks really, really nice. If you wanted, you could also try switching this profile to Clean and Classic Warmth and just dialing in the amount of warmth you want. So somewhere around there I really like. Take that back. Okay, looking pretty good. All right, this image is going to be super easy to edit, I can tell you already, because the light is super, super diffuse from all of these heavy clouds, super nice and flat. So pretty much anything you throw at it is going to look good. Doesn't matter that much, but I'll just give you an idea of what's inside, the different variations we can get with our presets here. So really, it's not about what's going to work, it's about which one do I like the most. So it's kind of nice to have different options that you can work with and just select from. I think that I actually like this one the most. The colors are very, very true to life, which is nice. We're just enhancing those greens, adding a little bit of pop, and we can move on. So here we have a very beautiful landscape image. We're going to start by just adjusting the exposure here and showing you a couple of the presets, the options that we have. Now I will say that Clean and Classic is developed to prioritize skin tones over everything else. We want to keep the skin looking amazing and natural, so it's going to work pretty well for a lot of your landscape photos. However, it's not specifically geared towards landscapes, because landscapes kind of generally require a really custom tailored approach where you go in, you take your time, and you edit things individually. You do a lot of custom brushing, that sort of thing. So what we'll do is we'll find a preset that kind of looks the best with what we got going on. I think that Night Earthy looks pretty cool. I also think that when we were up here, Blue Desaturated looks pretty nice and pretty natural. Maybe let's stick with that for now. And we're going to add some custom adjustment brushes. So with our preset pack, we actually include a beautiful set of adjustment brushes that we haven't yet installed. So let me show you how you do that. We're going to start by going up to Lightroom, Preferences, and this is only if you're using Lightroom Classic. It won't be available in Lightroom CC simply because Lightroom CC doesn't support custom brushes yet. If that changes, well, you might be able to do that later. Okay, so we're going to go to where it says Show Other Lightroom Presets. And depending on your version of Lightroom, this might be in a slightly different location. You can feel free to YouTube it for your specific version. And we're going to open this Lightroom folder and head down here where we have Local Adjustment Presets. Then we're going to go over to our Adjustment Brush Presets pack, drag that right in here, and restart Lightroom. All right, and now, if all has went well, perfect, you can see we have this nice set of custom-made brushes. And this is really handy because it saves you a lot of time not having to dial in specific settings every time you want to do a certain thing. So for instance, I want to add some texture to this hillside, so I can just select the texture brush and begin texturing away. So we're just going to emphasize kind of the little grassy knolls on this hill, the darker areas, the areas that just need a little bit extra pop. We'll do another new brush, and we'll emphasize this hill here because that is definitely a focal point of the image. Maybe add some whites so that we make it pop just a little bit more, and maybe add a little bit of texture with our texture setting here. Then we'll brush again onto this hillside, mountainside, I don't know what you call this, but particularly I'm just following the ledge here because what I want to do is add some dehaze and really make that ledge itself pop. Maybe add a little bit more white. Increase our contrast. Perfect, something like that. And then I'm going to brush on top of absolutely everything here. Raise our exposure very, very slightly. So you can see I'm really taking my time and dialing things in. If this were something I was doing just this image by itself and I was going to spend a lot of time on it, it would probably take me 30-40 minutes of just tweaking tiny little things, doing some really nice masking, but that kind of gives you an idea of the options that you have, and you'll have these adjustment brushes that you can then tweak things from there. So we've got everything from enhancing your image, retouching specifically for portraits and skin, special effects, so we could even add things like sun flares and save blown out skies, and add, this is really cool, it's called the Moody D Haze brush, so we're just going to brush on the sky up here. And you can see it's really going to add some extra mood to our image and get rid of those kind of bright parts of our sky. Perfect. Maybe a little bit too far up in this corner, so we'll just erase a little bit. Too much. Perfect. So here's before, and here's after. Maybe increase our contrast on this image. Before, after. All right, moving on. Now this image, if I apply presets right away, they're going to look very, very silly. And the reason for that is the white balance is super, super far out. You can see how blue everything in this photo is. So first I'm going to take my temperature and dial it in so that the white balance looks a lot more normal. Probably somewhere around there is more accurate. And you'll find the #1 way to make your presets look absolutely crazy and weird is if your white balance is out. So you got to watch for things like that. It might not be that the preset isn't working. It might just be that your white balance wasn't set right. Because now you can see that if I apply my presets, things are going to look a lot more normal. Now we might need to dial some things in, like for instance, there's maybe a little bit too much dehaze in this particular image. But let me show you, here is the as shot white balance, and here is after we've corrected it. So much better. All right, this image is definitely going to benefit from a nice night preset here. I love the night earthy on images like this. It really adds a nice kind of homey, very, very warm vibe. If we wanted, we could even warm it up more with our clean and classic warmth profile, and then just dial it in as we see fit. So maybe somewhere around there. All right, just an example of how the presets look with a portrait. Now you can dial in the intensity, of course. I'm not going to take too much time doing all of that. But we have just different basic options for skin tones and for portraits. That's close enough. Here's another one. Not a portrait. I mean, I guess it kind of is a portrait of this horse, but just an idea of the different looks that we can get across our different presets. Pretty quick, pretty easy. Okay, this one I think is going to look really good with the more earthy preset. Something like that. Maybe cool down the shot just a little bit. Add a little bit of contrast. Now this one, you could go a lot of different ways. You could do the clean and classic, which is really just going to give you that clean pop, and that's pretty extraordinary how much it just adds life to the image, right? It takes it right from being a kind of flat raw file to really adding pop without it looking super over edited or over contrasty, something like that. However, if we want more of an organic feel, we could go with the more earthy. And it's a winter photo, so maybe we want to cool it down. That's where maybe we could use this clean and classic ice preset. So you can see you can really dial in the amount of coldness that you want to add to your image. So something like that, if you want it to really feel like a cold winter day, well, there's your ticket. Likewise, if you want to warm things up, you can do that with our warmth brush. Warmth profile. I'm stumbling on my words here, but you understand my point. Okay, so clean and classic looks a little bit maybe too much for this particular image. Let's try the high dynamic range so that we can save some of the background here. And then we're just going to brush on top of her and just do a very basic brush. This is probably my favorite in all of Lightroom. It's super simple. You don't even need a preset. You just take your contrast down and you turn your whites up. Now my flow is all the way down, so you're not going to see that properly. Let's try it again. So the nice part is you don't even have to be super accurate because you don't see brush marks because it's a pretty subtle effect. We've just taken our contrast down, whites up, and here's before and after. You can see that does a really good job of making her pop out. And then if you want to, of course, we can go in and we can just erase, clean things up a little bit. Perfect. So I think that looks pretty good. Here's before and after. Again, we're not trying to change the look of the photo. We're just trying to kind of bring out what's already there. And if you find that this effect is just too strong, of course, I could just dial it back. Before, after. All right. This one's going to be pretty simple. Bam. Looks good. Now here's another example of a landscape photo where the Clean Classic pack really isn't designed for this specific type of photo. It's more for photos with portrait kind of stuff going on. We could find one, like perhaps let's try the HDR, high dynamic range. And I'm really not liking the lens correction on this particular image, so I'm going to shut that off. Then I'm going to add some more contrast to the image. Raise the exposure a little bit. And that looks okay, but again, the best thing we could do is to spend some time and just give this image individual attention because it is amazing. So we can maybe grab our texture brush here, bring out the texture of this hillside. We could again go to a new brush and select our water brush, Water Sky Pop. I'm going to put on Auto Mask and just try and mask out this lagoon here. Press O to see what you're doing. You can see that it did a very terrible job of auto-masking that. So I would probably have to go back in and just manually get things right. It's funny, sometimes Lightroom is amazing at that. Sometimes it just completely misses the boat. So here's before and after. Just bring some more definition to that water, really enhances the reflection. And if you want to dial that effect back, well, you grab your amount and dial it back. So here's our photo before and after. Like I said, I would spend more time on this photo to really make sure all of the details are enhanced where it needs to be enhanced and kind of give it that individual attention. That's going to give you your best results, not just doing a preset and hoping things will magically look perfect. But for photos that are portraits, Clean & Classic really can give you some one-click looks. It looks amazing with just a single click, and we've got lots of different options. So you can see in the original, just our normal Clean & Classic preset, we've got a lot of blue going on in his shirt, and that's because the white balance, for whatever reason, is probably an overcast day, so things are pretty blue. Now, if we just do the blue desat, it takes that right out of the image. Likewise, we can desaturate our greens up here, or we could warm up the skin, or we can warm up the greens. You've got lots of different options depending on what you prefer, what looks good to you. And these night presets aren't limited necessarily to just night. Sometimes they can look really good during the day. All right, this is a cute dog. We're going to just stick with our classic preset, adjust our crop a little bit. And if you want, you can dial in the amount of pop again with our profile up here. Now this is an example of a preset, a place where presets are going to struggle a little bit. And the reason is if you look at her skin, at first to your eyes, it looks totally normal. But then if we actually zoom in, and you really focus on, put your hand up to the computer and compare the color of your hand to the color of her skin is super saturated, super orange, super warm compared to the rest of the image. And that's because it's sunset and the sun is hitting her face, which is great. But what's going to happen is that the presets are going to enhance what is already there in the image. So what I mean is, let's hit this. And you can see that we've brightened her face, and her face is even more yellow and kind of saturated than it was before. So let's reset. And let's start by dialing in our white balance, just by cooling things down to get her skin a little bit closer to where it needs to be. Okay, that's looking all right. Things are still a little green around her face, so let's maybe add a little bit of magenta. And then I'm going to take a brush here. I'm going to turn off Auto Mask. I'm going to go to maybe a skin soften and desaturate, and we're just going to paint on her skin here. Being careful to miss the eye so we don't soften that. We'll take the contrast down a little bit, the highlights down a little bit. Okay, so here, so far we haven't added a preset. We're just getting ready. Here's before and here's after. See how much more normal the skin looks at this point? Now we're at a point where we can try some presets and see how they look. Now I know that our original preset, just the main clean classic, is going to look way too intense. I just know because it's a very high contrast image and things just look funny, right? Even if we dial back our exposure here, that's still looking pretty extreme. We can maybe add some magenta, cool things down a little bit, but it just looks way, way too far. We could try the HDR preset. That'll definitely do better. Maybe even add a little bit of contrast to this one. I think that looks pretty good. Here's before and here's after. Or we could try the more earthy preset. I think this one probably looks the best once we adjust for our exposure. It all depends on the vibe that you want from your image, but here's before and here's after, and you can really see the difference in the skin is incredible. There's maybe a little bit too little saturation in her skin here, so we'll add some back. But before and after, you can see what I was talking about. We really need to correct our photo, get the white balance correct. Before you apply your presets, you're going to get way better results. Again, here's before. If I just added that more earthy preset by itself compared to this, much more natural skin tones, much better result just by taking a little time and really focusing on what the image is like to begin with. Okay, let's keep going. Here's another nice landscape here, but we're looking pretty blue. I'm going to warm this up because our white balance is just not quite right. Somewhere around there, and you're going to get a much better effect. Maybe we could go with more earthy, or even our night earthy preset. I think that's looking pretty dang nice. Okay, now this is a great example of where our Clean and Classic Pink preset can be used. Our profile, not preset. So let's apply a basic preset to it. We could go with the Clean and Classic. We could just mess around, maybe go with the more earthy vibes. I think I like that one. Now we can try our different profiles. So here's the Ice preset. Kind of its own look. Pink is going to be really cool. Kind of gives us a nice sunset vibe. And then warmth is just going to warm things up even more than they already are. So here's before, and here's after. And again, before, after. This image here, we can start by adding our normal, clean, and classic. And I'm thinking that the skin is maybe a little bit too bright, so we can just use our skin minus preset, and that'll take that right down. Now we also have some alternates, of course. We could go with a more earthy vibe if that's more your thing and it just feels better for this image. I think that looks really, really nice. Alternately, we could maybe even desaturate the sky if that's bugging you and it's just too much saturation going up there in the sky. Lots of different options. This one will correct our exposure first. Then we'll maybe crop it so it's straight. Perfect. And here's our normal, clean, and classic brush, just how it's going to look. If we wanted, we could maybe add a sun flare up here in this corner. So we've already got a sun flare going on, but we can really easily enhance that by just going down here to our special effects, go with sun flare. You'll see we've got a sun flare we can now move around, and we can dial that back. Remember, all you have to do is hit this little triangle, collapse it. We can take our effect and dial it in. And then what I like to do once I've dialed it in is add a little bit more warmth and maybe increase the saturation depending on the situation. So with this one, I think that would look all right. Something like that. So here's before and after. Easy. Now, I think that maybe we'd be better off with our night earthy preset here. Cool. I think that's nice. And lastly, if we wanted to warm it up even more, maybe go to the clean and classic warmth. And you can just dial that in however you like. Add a little contrast to the whole image. We're looking pretty good. So here's before and after in just a couple of clicks. All right, same kind of situation here. Lots of different options. I'm not going to spend too much time on there. Here's a concert photo. Let's make sure we're reset. Okay, so right off the bat, I can tell you this preset, the base preset is going to really take too much contrast, add too much contrast to the image, especially because if we reset and we focus on his skin, do the same thing. I'm going to zoom in even more. You can see how bright, first off, his skin is to the rest of the image, but if you really focus, put your hand next to this green, and compare it to his face. See how much more saturated his face is? See how bright and blown out parts of it are? See how kind of orangey and greeny his skin is? So we're going to start by fixing that. So we could start with our white balance if we wanted. We could maybe roll that back a little bit. Add some magenta to kind of counteract the yellowness going on in his skin. Then I'm going to take a brush, use our skin soften and desaturate preset again. Now we're going to erase it around his eyes afterwards and around the chains. We kind of probably want to take the tattoo and erase that as well, because we don't want to lose the kind of contrast of that. Erase around his eyes. And then I'm going to roll back on the highlights a little bit, roll back on the contrast, hit O so I can see my mask. Now I would take a little bit more time if this were not such a quick demonstration. We'll just erase the kind of key features we want to keep sharp, like his eyebrows and his eyes, and this chain here. Okay, so here's before, and here's after. We've just rolled that back. Now we can start applying a preset. You can see things look so much better already from before and after. So this image is now looking pretty good. I could actually probably just add a little bit of contrast, maybe some vibrance or some dehaze, maybe enhance these clouds a little bit, and I would be happy with it. You don't necessarily need to add a preset to every single image. It's not always necessary, especially with indoor presets, indoor situations where the lighting is harsh like this. It might be more of a custom brush job than a preset job. But what we can do is go to another image that we've got and just copy the parts of our preset that we do want to apply. So I still want to apply sharpening to the image. I still want to make sure that I have my noise reduction on and my lens corrections on. So I'm going to copy those as well as my grain, and I'm going to paste that over onto this image. There you go. You can see we've just added some sharpening. Things are popping, looking pretty good. Here's before and after. So I don't think I even need a preset. If I wanted to, I could go and I could try and find the one that works. But again, when you've got a really harsh lighting situation, oftentimes you'll just be better served by doing something like this, and you can use these preset brushes. Okay, moving on here, we've got a nice photo from, I think this is Turkey or Tunisia or somewhere like that. And you can see that pretty much any preset we pick is going to look pretty darn good in this scene. And the reason that it looks good is because the photo itself is really, the light is balanced. It's not super harsh. Our composition is really nice. The colors are nice. We've got a great color scheme going on. We don't have a bunch of conflicting things happening in our image. And so it's going to be really easy to get this image to look good. Even if we were just to take some contrast and some exposure and leave it like that, it still looks pretty darn good by itself, right? So that's the thing that you need to bear in mind as well when you're using your presets. Presets aren't going to fix a crappy photo. They're going to take a good photo and make it look even better. They'll take a crappy photo and make it look slightly better, or sometimes they'll actually exaggerate the crappiness of the photo depending on what's going on. So be aware of that. Again, we're going to keep going through here. Just grab a few presets. That looks okay. I think maybe the earthy would be a better vibe for this particular image. Perfect. Okay. Looks pretty good right out of the gate. Again, here's before and after. You can see we really haven't changed much about the image. We're just kind of enhancing things, bringing the shadows up a little bit. If you want to really add some more look to your image, we could try some of our different variations here. Maybe the more earthy or the night earthy, that'll warm things up. Or maybe even want to do a nighttime warm look. Black and white. I think that's pretty cool. Okay, this is another image where we do need to be aware of the colors naturally going on. So if you look at her skin, at first your eyes are going to just tell you it's all the same, but then look at the difference in color between her leg and her face, and even the side of her face and her arm here compared to the front of her face. We've got some kind of light coming in from the side here that is very, very green. This is without any changes to the image, just as it was shot. And that light is hitting her face, reflecting, so everything is looking a little bit green. Even her hair, we've got some weird greenness going on. So we're going to have to correct for that, and when we first apply our preset, it's just going to exaggerate that effect. So I can dial it back, and it looks okay, but we're going to need to even out her skin to really get it looking the way we want. So I'll zoom out a little bit here. And we'll start by just taking our skin soften, desaturate brush, and we'll apply that to her leg. We're going to take the contrast down and the whites up. Easiest way to brighten something in the image and make it not super obvious. Then we're going to match it a little bit in color by taking the magenta down a little bit. Something right around there. So here's before and here's after. It's not totally matching yet, but we're a lot closer. I'm going to do the same thing with her hand and her arm. So we'll grab that. Now this effect obviously is a little bit too strong, so I'll dial it back so we can't really see what's going on. It's just very subtle. Hello. And sometimes you'll find that that just doesn't work because Lightroom is being cranky. So we'll dial it back manually like this. Okay, that's looking better. The mask around her arm definitely needs more work because I was expecting Lightroom to be better. Silly me. Okay, that's a little bit closer here. Maybe the tips of her fingers I missed. Okay, and then lastly, we're going to do a bit of a mask on her face. And this one isn't going to try and declarify things. We're just going to try and get rid of the green tone going on as well in her hair. Anywhere that looks green to me, parts of her arm here, I'm going to try and correct that. So we'll just reset our brush, add some magenta. You can see things are looking way better just by doing that. Lower the contrast a little bit, raise the whites very slightly. Okay, so here's before and after. You can see there's a real prominent green tinge that we've gotten rid of. Now when we add our presets to the image, it's going to work a lot better because we've corrected things that needed to be corrected. So our more earthy preset, that looks really, really good right out of the gate. We could also try maybe the HDR, depending what kind of look you want. And of course, if we desaturate our greens, that might actually help in getting rid of that to begin with. So our green skin fix, going to turn everything a little bit more magenta. That looks pretty dang good as well. So take your choice. Lots of different options. They all look good. We just need to make sure that we correct things in camera that a preset isn't going to catch. Those local adjustments we need to do with the brush. Okay, so here, lots of different options here. I think all of these look good. And again, a good photo, great composition, great lighting, nice and soft. Nothing is overexposed. We have nice colors complementing each other. They're all going to look good. Doesn't matter which preset you choose or even if you apply a preset. So the number one key to great preset results is using great photos and getting it right in camera. So again, here's our main clean and classic preset. Maybe you want to warm it up, make it a little bit less contrasty. You can do that with our earthy or maybe our night earthy. Lightroom is taking its sweet time for some reason and showing up, but there we go. We got there eventually. And with this one, it looks like our lens corrections are going a little bit haywire, so we'll just adjust that. Okay, so here's before and after. Lots of different options. All look pretty good and don't change the colors too much. Now here's a great photo. Let's try our normal clean and classic. Looks pretty good. Try our sunset. You can see the skin tones are darker intentionally so that we're not way too bright in our skin. Or we could even try a night earthy. That's going to really pop nicely. We'll just want to make this skin a little bit less green, maybe a little less saturated. So we could go in here and manually brush on. Something like that. So the preset's going to get you 90% of the way there, but it's the other 10% of polishing your image that's going to take it that extra step. So here's without the brush, and then with the brush. So it's subtle, but it really cleans up their skin a little bit, gets rid of some of those patchy kind of areas, while at the same time maintaining the amount of color we've got going on in the background. We could have taken the color down overall, but that would have really gotten rid of the punch of this beautiful sunset. Now I'm going to zoom in a little bit more, and I would probably spend a little bit more time cleaning up things like this red going on around her skin, the red in the shadows underneath his hat. We could fix that pretty quickly and pretty simply with a second brush. Take our contrast down, maybe our dehaze down a little bit. That'll fix that. So before and after. Those little things that just add the extra polish to your image, it's going to be worth it. This shot right here, there's lots of different options we could use. We could go with our more earthy preset, or just a clean and classic. But I am noticing that the skin is pretty bright in this particular preset, so we'll just lower that with our skin minus preset. Perfect. Something like that. Looks pretty good. Okay, this is another example of where we can really use this pink profile. So we can grab our pink profile once we've applied our preset. It'll look really cool. So here's our normal, clean, and classic. Or if you want to tone it down a little bit, maybe go with the more earthy. Depending on the vibe you want, then grab either our warmth or our pink. Would both probably look cool. So here's the warmth. Makes things really nice and golden delicious. Or our pink kind of adds that sunset vibe. We just need to make it a little darker to really get the effect. And we've got some vignetting around the corners of our image. So we are going to go, where are we here? To our lens corrections and take that manual vignetting back off. Okay, that looks pretty good. Here's another wedding image. Nothing super special about this particular photo, just showing you the different varieties that we can get from it. Lots of different options, and we can correct for all sorts of things. So here's a high dynamic range version. If you want things more soft, we can also desaturate the blues if it's bugging us. We can desaturate those greens. Correct the skin a bit. Warm the greens up. Pretty much everything looks good, while at the same time not looking super over-edited, keeping those colors looking rather natural. All right, just a few more photos to go here, so we'll just breeze right through them. Pretty quick, pretty simple. Maybe let's do the HDR because we're looking a little contrasty. Add a little bit of pop back into our image. That's looking good. Now their skin is a little bit white. We could maybe consider adding some saturation back into it. So just go to your saturation, your HSL. Maybe bring the oranges up just a bit, somewhere around there. And then if I were editing this entire wedding, obviously I would take this change and I'd probably apply it across most of my photos. So it's okay to actually tweak your presets, especially if you find, you're using a Sony camera and Sony, for whatever reason, one color seems to be different and you're consistently changing it. You can grab these presets, adjust it. So let's say that this preset, overall I found it was just always a little bit too contrasty. Well, I could dial the amount back, go to my preset and go update with current settings, and that would then update it. So then normally, when I'm editing my photos, I'll have all of these presets actually tweaked to fit me and my camera and my shooting style. So anyways, here is our preset base. It's definitely very cold. Our white balance needs to be warmed up here. So we could warm it. Now the thing is, with most presets, you'd have to kind of dial in the white balance, and that's as warm as you can get it. Once I take it further up, things just start to look really, really weird. However, the nice part about these profiles is being able to add that warmth. It does it in a pretty organic way. So here's before, and as we add the warmth, it doesn't look overly warm, I guess. It looks really nice and warm, but it doesn't look like you've taken it way too far, like you've over-edited it. So here's before, and here's after. That's pretty nice. All right, a couple more for you. So here's the normal, clean, classic. Dial that back. Lots of nice pop in this image. Or we could go with something a little bit more vibey. Whatever you prefer. Here's another example of where white balance is really important. Let's start with the stock image. If I just go clean and classic, it looks okay, but you see how blue his shirt is? Well, that's because our white balance just isn't right. So if I were to reset this image, tweak our white balance so that things are kind of more natural to where we want them to be, probably around there is actually more what the white balance should have been for this shot. Then I add my preset. Look at the difference in results. It looks so much better. So much closer. Maybe I'm a little too warm, but I could dial that back. It's still a huge difference between what we had. Here's as shot, and after we've adjusted that white balance. Here's another one from the same shoot. Again, very, very cold, but as I warm it up, my preset all of a sudden starts to look like it actually works, whereas before you'd be like, oh, that looks super strange. And our exposure, of course, needs to be set properly. If we don't have that the right way, it's not going to look great. Let's darken our skin very slightly. Okay, something like that looks good. The earthy might look really good on this as well. All depends on the vibe and tone you're going for. Okay, we're going to adjust our exposure here. Our preset doesn't need to be applied until we got our white balance right. So I'm going to take that, adjust it. Now we can adjust with our different presets. Now because this image is pretty contrasty, we might need to dial things back a little bit. The skin's maybe slightly too bright. Something like that. That looks pretty good. So here's before and after. So you can see we're keeping the colors intact. We're just adding some pop, adding some polish to the image, enhancing what is already there. This image looks pretty great just with one click, and then let's just warm it up very slightly. And we're done. That's the run through of our clean and classic presets. I hope this was helpful for you, being able to see me edit live and just react to different images, see what you should do when things go wrong. It might be your dehaze, it might be a specific area of the image that you just need to tweak with a local adjustment. Just different things. Remember that presets will get you 90% of the way there, but it's the other 10% that can make a huge difference when it comes to just local adjustments, getting your white balance and your exposure right, dialing those settings in, getting the foundations first, and starting with a really nice image to begin with are going to really magnify your results. So I hope this was helpful. If you have questions, feel free to reach out to us. We'd love to respond and help however we can. And I can't wait to get this preset back into your hands so that you can start editing and making better images. All right, thanks so much. Take care.